Imagine having a roommate who literally follows you around every single second of the day. But, this isn't a supportive friend.
Right. Definitely not.
No, all they do is narrate your life with the most cynical, unforgiving, just downright mean commentary imaginable. Like you drop a pen and they yell about your clumsiness.
Right.
Or you send a slightly awkward email at work and they lean in to whisper that everyone in the office thinks you're an absolute fraud. If a physical human being spoke to you like that in your own home, you would change the locks.
I mean, you'd have to. It would be a clear violation of basic respect, right?
Yeah.
Something you wouldn't tolerate for a second from a stranger or even a family member.
Exactly. But because it's our own internal monologue, we just sort of accept it. We invite that horrible roommate to breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah, we do.
And that is really the foundation for today's deep dive. We are looking at a dynamic that you've universally experienced, I'm sure, yet it's rarely dissected, like the sheer cruelty of our own inner dialogue.
It's a huge issue.
It is, and we have a really fascinating piece of source material today. It's a document titled Healing the Self-Abuse Within by pastoral clinical counselor John Baptist. What makes this piece so incredibly valuable is, well, it synthesizes two very different frameworks.
Right, the philosophical and the psychological.
Yes, exactly. It bridges the philosophical observations of Don Miguel Ruiz with the rigorous evidence-based psychological research of Kristen Neff.
Which is such a brilliant combination. It pairs the deep sort of diagnostic clarity of philosophy with the highly practical clinical pathways of modern psychology. So it gives us a really comprehensive look at the actual mechanics of negative self-talk.
Yeah. And our mission for you today is to figure out why we are so relentlessly mean to ourselves, how this internal cruelty secretly dictates the treatment we accept from other people, and most importantly, the tools to actually rewire that inner voice.
That's the real goal here.
So, okay, let's unpack this, because reading through the source material, I was really struck by the specific terminology Baptist uses. I mean, he doesn't call it just being hard on yourself.
No, he doesn't.
He calls it self-abuse. And, we usually casually dismiss self-criticism. We brush it off as someone just having high standards or whatever. Using the word abuse completely changes the gravity of the situation.
It absolutely does. It demands that you take the internal dialogue seriously, just stripping away that casual dismissal.
Right.
And before we get to the mechanics of changing this voice, we need to look at the true scale of the problem. This goes far beyond just having a moment of low confidence.
Oh, for sure.
The implications bleed into relationships, careers, physical health. And this is the core premise drawn from Don Miguel Ruiz. Ruiz writes, nobody has ever abused you more than you have abused yourself.
Wow. That is a heavy statement on its own.
It really is.
It completely reframes the entire concept of victimization, I think.
Yeah, and he follows it up with an even more complex idea. Ruiz states, the limit of your self-abuse is exactly the limit that you will tolerate from someone else.
Man, I was thinking about the mechanics of that second sentence, and the best way I can picture it is like a thermostat for bad treatment.
Oh, a thermostat. I like that.
Right. Like if we set our internal thermostat to harsh, meaning we are constantly radiating this freezing, punitive judgment toward ourselves, we don't even notice when other people walk into the room and freeze us out.
Because the temperature already feels normal.
Exactly. So does this mean our internal monologue is literally training us, like, day by day, to accept bad behavior from the outside world?
What's fascinating here is how the psychology of baseline establishment operates. It totally validates your thermostat analogy.
Okay, how so?
Well, human beings possess this deep, subconscious drive for psychological consistency. We desperately want the outside world to match our inside world.
Even if the inside world is terrible.
Even then. Even if that inside world is a miserable place to be. If your internal baseline, like your fundamental belief about what you deserve, is abusive and deeply critical, external cruelty feels deeply familiar. And because it feels familiar, it feels safe. Or at the very least, acceptable.
So we're basically dealing with a form of cognitive dissonance that actively works against our own well-being.
Exactly.
Like if my internal voice tells me every single day that I am incompetent, and then a boss or a partner treats me like I'm incompetent, my brain just registers that as a match.
It's confirming your bias.
Right. It says, yes, this aligns with the data I already have. I don't fight back because I fundamentally agree with the premise of their disrespect.
And the inverse is equally true, which is where this dynamic gets incredibly complex.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, if you have a harsh internal baseline and someone actually treats you with profound respect or gentleness or unconditional positive regard, your brain might actually reject it.
Really, it rejects the good treatment.
Yeah, it causes anxiety. You start searching for the catch. You think they must have an ulterior motive or they simply haven't discovered the quote-unquote real flawed version of you yet. The mind works overtime to push that positive external treatment away just to maintain the internal status quo.
That is wild. We are effectively drawing the blueprint for how the world is allowed to handle us. If the blueprint says handle with zero care, people will follow those instructions.
Exactly.
So, understanding the stakes of this framework really leads us to ask how this operates in mundane, everyday life. Because, we aren't usually dealing with cinematic breakdowns every day.
Right, it's much more subtle.
Yeah, we are dealing with the daily paper cuts. And the text uses a great, highly relatable example. Imagine you make a completely normal mistake at work, like forgetting to reply to an important email.
Or speaking up in a meeting and saying something that lands a bit awkwardly.
Yeah, a standard human error that happens in every office, every single day. Under healthy circumstances, your brain would just execute a simple course correction.
Right, you just fix it.
You would think, I should send that email now, or I'll choose my words more carefully next time. But instead, an entirely different mechanism activates. The source material refers to this as the inner judge.
The inner judge.
Yeah, and the inner judge bypasses the specific action and issues a sweeping indictment of your entire character. The thought process morphs from, you forgot an email, into, you are careless, you always mess things up, people must think you are completely foolish.
Yeah, notice the absolute terms being deployed there. Always. Foolish.
Yeah.
Careless. The inner judge thrives on identity-level attacks rather than situational facts.
Right, it makes it about who you are, not what you did.
Exactly. And the text points out the disproportionate timeline of this punishment. Think about that awkward comment in the meeting. Everyone else in that room moved on within, 10 seconds.
Oh, absolutely. They went back to worrying about their own lunch, their deadlines, their own insecurities.
Right. They're entirely occupied by their own inner judges. They literally don't have the bandwidth to obsess over your minor fumble.
Yeah, nobody's thinking about you as much as you are.
Yet, in your mind, the inner judge continues to litigate the case for days, maybe even weeks. You find yourself lying in bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, vividly reliving a minor social awkwardness from 5 years ago.
Oh, I've definitely been there.
We all have. And this is what Ruiz identifies as the specific wound of self-abuse. It is the relentless, disproportionate, and recurring nature of the punishment long after the actual event has concluded.
Okay, I need to push back on this a bit, though, or at least play devil's advocate, because there is a deeply ingrained cultural fear about letting go of this harsh internal voice.
Oh, for sure. The fear of laziness.
Exactly. Many of us feel that this inner judge is actually necessary, like we view it as the engine of our success. The underlying fear is that without that harsh judge cracking the whip, we would just become completely apathetic.
That we just stop trying.
Right. We'd ignore our emails, make careless mistakes constantly, lose our competitive edge, and eventually just get fired. The cruelty feels like the price of admission for high achievement.
Well, that is the ultimate defense mechanism of the inner judge. It basically masquerades as a tough love motivational speaker.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the actual neurological and psychological outcomes of this behavior. The text carefully defines this self-abuse as a cycle of blame, shame, and repeated inner punishment. We really have to separate the concept of accountability from the experience of toxic shame.
Okay, let's dig into that separation. How does the brain process accountability versus shame? Because they feel tangled up for a lot of people.
You do. But acknowledging a mistake is a cognitive productive process. Saying, I missed that email, so I need to implement a better calendar system, is an observation based on facts.
Right, it's actionable.
Yes,
Huh.
it engages the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for logical planning and problem solving. But the inner judge's approach saying, I missed that email because I am a careless failure, does not help you build a better calendar system.
Yeah, it just makes you feel terrible.
Exactly. Instead, it triggers a threat response. It literally floods your nervous system with cortisol and adrenaline. It creates a state of toxic shame.
So wait, when I launch an identity-level attack on myself, my brain reacts as if there is a literal physical threat in the room.
Neurobiologically speaking, yes.
Wow.
The amygdala hijacks the brain, and a brain flooded with shame and perceived threat is fundamentally incapable of high-level learning, adapting, or creative problem solving. The executive function just shuts down.
That's incredible.
So the idea that the inner judge is keeping you sharp is a biological fallacy. The cruelty isn't fueling your success at all. It's exhausting your cognitive resources. It forces you to operate from a state of chronic stress, which is entirely destructive to long-term performance.
Okay, so the inner judge is basically a terrible manager who relies on screaming and intimidation. Like, it might get a short-term burst of frantic activity out of the employee, but eventually it destroys morale and productivity.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
So if the inner judge is this ineffective, damaging mechanism, we are left with a massive problem. How do we hold ourselves accountable without the cruelty? We need an alternative.
And that's where the second part of the source material comes in.
Right. The source material brings in psychologist Kristin Neff to provide the path of healing through self-compassion.
Yes. Kristin Neff's research provides a vital paradigm shift here. But the term self-compassion suffers from a bit of a branding problem in popular culture.
Oh, totally.
It's often misunderstood as self-indulgence. You know, taking a spa day, buying yourself something nice, or just ignoring your responsibilities.
It's the whole treat yourself mentality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Neff's clinical definition is far more rigorous and demanding. She defines self-compassion as treating ourselves with profound kindness when we fail, while consciously remembering that imperfection is a shared, universal part of the human experience.
So it's about connection, not isolation.
Right. It requires the understanding that failing does not isolate you from humanity. It is the very thing that connects you to it.
The text is incredibly explicit about addressing the fear of complacency we just discussed, too. It states clearly that self-compassion does not mean excusing everything we do.
Crucial point.
Yeah, it is not a free pass to behave badly or lower our standards. It defines the practice as refusing to destroy ourselves while we learn from our mistakes. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, let's hear it.
I kept trying to visualize how accountability coexists with profound kindness, and I kept coming back to the mechanics of sports coaching.
Oh, that's an interesting angle. How does that dynamic map onto the inner judge versus self-compassion?
Well, think about the physical and mental difference between playing for a highly toxic coach versus a truly great coach. A toxic coach, which is our inner judge, screams insults from the sidelines after a bad play.
Right, just tearing the player down.
Yeah, they yell about the player having no talent, being a disgrace, being the reason the team is losing. And what happens? The player's nervous system floods with threat. They freeze. They start dropping the ball out of pure, trembling anxiety. They play not to win, but just to avoid being yelled at.
Which completely destroys the player's capacity to perform.
Exactly. Now look at the great coach. Does the great coach ignore a terrible play? Do they say, oh, don't worry about throwing the ball to the wrong team. Your effort was perfect.
No, of course not.
No. A good coach is incredibly firm. They blow the whistle, stop the play, and point out the flawed technique. They tell the player their elbow is too low or their footwork was sloppy, but underneath that strict correction, there is a fundamental, unwavering belief in the player's potential.
They separate the action from the person.
Yes, they address the action relentlessly, but they never attack the player's dignity. Is this what the text means by refusing to destroy ourselves?
That analogy perfectly captures the linchpin of Neff's theory.
Yes.
The great coach holds the player fully accountable, but completely removes the toxic shame. Right. You are required to own the missed email or the awkward comment. You have to take responsibility for the impact of your actions. But you are correcting the action without condemning the actor.
Which is such a massive shift.
It is the crucial difference between self-compassion and, say, narcissism or self-pity. You don't deflect the blame, but you also don't use the mistake as evidence that you are fundamentally broken.
We separate the what I did from the who I am.
Exactly.
And conceptually, I mean, this makes perfect sense. We understand the wound of self-abuse mapped out by Ruiz, and we understand the cure of accountable self-compassion advocated by Neff. But we really need to look at how this operates at ground level.
Yes, the practical application.
Because it is easy to process this intellectually while listening to a deep dive on a calm afternoon. It is an entirely different challenge when your heart rate is spiking at 120 beats per minute because you just made a highly visible error at work and the adrenaline is surging.
The point of impact is where the theory actually has to translate into immediate practice. Because when the nervous system is highly activated, complex philosophical concepts usually just go right out the window.
So what does this all mean for the listener in that exact moment? How do we interrupt the inner judge when it has already taken the microphone and started broadcasting the worst possible narrative?
Well, the source material offers a highly tactical, actionable shift for this exact scenario.
Okay, what is it?
It distills the complex psychology into a single, powerful circuit breaker. The instruction from John Baptist is to forcefully pause the internal narrative and ask one simple question. Would I say this to someone I love?
Wow. It sounds almost too simple on the surface, but when you actually attempt it, it is incredibly confronting.
Because the answer is universally no.
Hmm.
If you would not say those words to someone you love, the thought is not a reflection of truth. It is simply an act of cruelty.
Right.
Healing the self-abuse within begins when we stop standing before ourselves as a punitive judge and deliberately choose to sit with ourselves as a compassionate friend.
To really test this, we can try a mental exercise. Just, picture the face of your absolute best friend sitting right in front of you. Imagine they just committed the exact same mistake you did.
Okay.
They forgot the crucial email. They completely embarrassed themselves in a high-stakes meeting. They come to you, near tears, confessing this mistake and just spiraling into panic.
Observe your natural instinct in that scenario.
Right. You would never look your best friend in the eye and say, "You are careless. You always mess everything up, and everyone in that room thinks you're a complete fool." The mere thought of saying those words to someone you care about feels repulsive.
It really does.
Your immediate instinct would be to de-escalate their panic. You would put a hand on their shoulder and say, "Take a breath. It's just an email. We will figure out how to fix it. You are incredibly competent at your job. This is just a minor blip."
And this raises an important question about how we construct our own reality, doesn't it? Like, how do we define truth in our own minds?
Oh, that's a great point. We justify the judge.
We do. We often defend our inner judge by claiming it is the only voice willing to be realistic. We tell ourselves we are just facing the cold, hard facts of our own incompetence. We literally believe that being brutal is synonymous with being objective.
It's not.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The friend test exposes a vital psychological reality from the source. Cruelty masquerading as truth is still just cruelty.
Cruelty masquerading as truth. I love that phrasing. We convince ourselves that the meanest voice in our head is the most accurate one.
Always.
But if we evaluate the evidence, the inner judge is actually a terrible historian. It ignores the hundreds of emails you sent correctly. It ignores the years of competent work. It fixates on a single data point and extrapolates it into a fixed identity.
It cherry picks the worst moments.
Exactly. And if we wouldn't accept that twisted, heavily biased version of the truth for a friend, we have zero logical business accepting it for ourselves.
You are essentially bringing a skilled defense attorney into the courtroom of your mind to cross-examine the inner judge. When forced to provide actual evidence for claims like you always ruin everything, the judge's arguments simply collapse under the scrutiny of compassion and objective reality.
So true. All right, let's pull all of these threads together and look at the terrain we've covered today. We started by uncovering the hidden, pervasive dangers of our internal tolerance limits.
Through the lens of Don Miguel Ruiz.
Right. We examined how our own self-abuse calibrates the exact standard for what we will unconsciously accept from the rest of the world. Our internal thermostat dictates our external reality, often leading us to accept toxic environments simply because they feel familiar.
And we then explored the anatomy of the inner judge, looking at how it weaponizes everyday mistakes using those absolute identity-destroying terms.
Which doesn't even work.
Exactly. We broke down the neurobiology of this process, seeing how a brain flooded with shame effectively shuts down its own ability to learn and adapt, proving that the inner judge is not a motivational tool, but a destructive force.
Yeah. And from there, we transitioned to Kristin Neff's framework of self-compassion. We established the crucial difference between making excuses and making space for accountability without shame.
The sports coach analogy.
Exactly. We looked at how to become a phenomenal coach to yourself, addressing the flawed technique while maintaining an unwavering belief in your own potential. And finally, we armed you with the friend test, that real-time, highly practical tool to expose the inner judge and enforce radical internal kindness.
It really provides a comprehensive, actionable toolkit for fundamentally rewiring the way you inhabit your own mind.
It does. And as we wrap up, I want to remind you that changing an internal narrative that's been running on autopilot for decades is, well, it's a gradual process.
You can't fix it overnight.
No, you will still have moments where the inner judge gets the upper hand. You will still make minor fumbles. But the next time you drop the ball, remember the core message of today's deep dive. Giving yourself mercy isn't letting yourself off the hook. It is simply refusing to destroy yourself in the process of getting better.
I love that. And I wanted to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you step back into your daily routine. Think back to that thermostat analogy and Ruiz's law of tolerance.
Okay.
If your inner voice is currently setting the exact limit for what you will tolerate from others, what happens to the relationships in your life once you start speaking to yourself with radical, unwavering kindness?
Oh, wow. That shifts the entire dynamic of how we exist in the world.
It does. If you drastically raise the temperature of the respect you demand from yourself, the old baseline of external mistreatment will no longer feel familiar. It will feel intolerable.
Right.
So as you practice this self-compassion, observe the people around you. Will your newly elevated internal standards force them to step up and meet you at this new level of respect? Or will it force them to step out of your life entirely?
Man, it is a profound realization that changing how you speak to yourself isn't just an internal exercise. It has the power to reshape your entire external universe. It is time to take a hard, objective look at that invisible roommate narrating your life. If they refuse to learn how to speak to you like a friend, it is time to change the locks. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Take care of yourself, and we'll catch you next time.